Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast, This Week in America. The Cloud People is a fun and vibrant fantasy novel by Kenard Tuzeneu, a Catholic priest for 42 years, currently serving as pastor of a large parish in southern New Jersey. Now, it's the story of Billy, a typical middle-grade boy who's excited to spend his summer vacation with his grandparents in Indiana. And on this trip, he gets to go alone. The vacation is filled with lessons of life, loyalty, and friendship, and lots of surprises, and a big one at the end that will leave you guessing. Monsignor Kenard Tuzeneu, author of the imaginative young adult fiction The Cloud People, is our guest on This Week in America. Monsignor, welcome to the program. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to see you. Good to be with you. Thank you.
It is a pleasure to have you here. I love this story, and there's so many elements designed for people a little younger than me, but I enjoyed this story as well. It gets you thinking about all the different themes you bring up in the book. This is the first book that you've written. What prompted you to write this book? Where did the story come from?
Well, I remember as a kid, I always liked to use my imagination. And even in my family, I would make up stories. So ever since then, I've always had that as part of my nature. And as my work as pastor, I write a little letter each week in the bulletin. And I try to not just do religious theme, but things that are going on in people's lives. And at Christmas, I always write a little something as kind of like a gift to them. Well, this started as just kind of like an idea. I was on my way to visit my brother in Tennessee, my younger brother, and I was looking at the plane and I saw clouds, and all of a sudden just the idea came to me. Suppose I saw people in the clouds, and then it started as just kind of like a simple little story, but then I said, this has to be a book, because I just kept writing it. Grew and grew, yeah.
So this is interesting. That was the basis. Real life was the basis for this story, the Cloud People. What was the reaction? You mentioned the people in the congregation used to having you write things, the bulletins and messages, that type of thing. And now they find out that Monsignor actually has a book that he's published. What was the reaction with the people in the church?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I kind of kept it a secret while I was writing it. I guess part of it because I wanted to make sure I could actually finish it. I was trying to keep the theme private because to me I thought it was unique and no one had really done anything like that. So I guess I was kind of protecting it. But then when I finally got it done and I announced it, they were all kind of excited and pleased. They're very, very supportive. It was a nice reaction. It's interesting. I have a mixed parish, but a lot of them are seniors, and they were very, very supportive, and a number of them have bought it and read it. So I think I have more senior citizens reading it than kids, even though it's a kind of a kid's story.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So I'm not the exception to the rule by saying that I enjoyed the book as well. The book is The Cloud People. The author is Kenard Tuzeneu, and I'll spell that for you. And if you're Googling, and we got a direct link to Amazon on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Kenard is Kenard. Tuzeneu, Tuzeneu. The name of the book is The Cloud People. You'll find it at Amazon, all of the usual places. Mention this is your first book. Is this the first attempt at writing that you've done on this level?
It is. I did a couple of short stories. I mentioned that I write stuff for Christmas, but one story that became a little bit longer, I called it Santa and the Easter Bunny. So that was not a full book, but it was kind of just a fantasy story for Christmas that I gave to people in my parish and families, just kind of connecting Christmas and Easter. But this is the first book that I've actually written. Yeah.
What was it like writing this book? Was it difficult to write the book? You had this idea, you're working on it, you've had this kicking around in your mind for a number of years, and you start writing it. Was it difficult, more difficult than you thought it was going to be to write this book?
Definitely. It certainly gave me a respect for people that write books and people that write a lot of books. I can't imagine how they do it because I had the idea. I said, okay, well, that's nice, but that's just an idea. What do I do with it now? So I just started writing. I would just do a little bit at a time. And to be honest, if it wasn't for COVID, which was a terrible tragedy for many, many people, I don't know if I ever would have written it because what happened is as things were closed down and the parish office was closed, I said, well, what am I going to do with my time? And I said, well, maybe I'll use that to finish the book, because I said, well, maybe if it goes any place, maybe if I raise any money, I can use it to support the parish and our projects. So that's what I would do. I would kind of like come into the office and take care of messages and things, and then I would start to write the book. And then so that really gave me the time to finish it. So if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I ever would have got it. So besides the idea of the thoughts of the story, it was just finding the time to do it. Because I always joke, I said, well, I have a full-time job, so I'm not really a full-time author. So that was a challenge.
Well, it is difficult for someone like yourself, very busy, and then you're trying to write this, and you write a little bit, and then you don't get back to it for a while. And as you mentioned, COVID, one of the few benefits of that was the fact that people had time to do things and maybe connect like they hadn't before. In your case, writing a book. We've mentioned the themes in the book. The book is The Cloud People. Kenard Tuzeneu is our guest on the program. What do you hope people get from the book, besides a story well told about Billy and what he goes through and what he sees and how he deals with it? What do you hope the reader takes away?
Always, like when I write my stories for Christmas, I always like to leave a point. And so I was just basically trying to like communicate essential values at the most basic level. I just wanted to encourage young people to use their imagination. I mean, I think that's something that maybe that we've lost. And I think that's a gift that we have, particularly I think for young people. So I wanted to encourage them to use their imagination. And of course, interwoven in there is certain basic values, like family values. I just wanted to encourage like respect in the family, love of family, friendship. There's a big theme of friendship, kind of like as a sub-theme, honoring our veterans. A couple of the stories involve family members and kind of like their service. So honoring that. In fact, I know I cried myself when I wrote part of it because my dad was a veteran. So that was a part that was close to my heart. But just those basic themes and values is what I wanted to communicate.
You mentioned the idea came from an actual flight that you were on, and that inspired you to ultimately write this book, The Cloud People. What impact did that experience of seeing the cloud and faces in the cloud, what was that experience like for you? What impact did that have on you?
Well, it was kind of like a light bulb, because I always like to be by the window when I fly. And I think like many people, I've always been fascinated with clouds. I mean, you can always see all kinds of things in there, but I remember looking out and I remember thinking to myself, what would it be like? And then I started to think, suppose there's a whole group of people, like a whole another level of existence. So it was kind of like a light bulb moment. I thought, well, that's really cool. And the next thing I said, this should be a story, So it was just kind of like almost like an inspiration for me anyway.
When you wrote the story, did you have any help? Did you bounce any ideas off anybody, especially during that time period when it was very difficult to get much contact with people? Any help in writing The Cloud People?
Early on, I ran it by a couple of people and a couple of younger people to just kind of like, because I don't normally write like children's stories, so they just kind of get their input. And I got some good suggestions for them. The biggest one was that my style of writing is normally narrative, and was suggested to me that it should be told from the point of view of Billy. And so I thought, well, that's kind of like a good, and so I had to start rewriting from the beginning to change that, from a narrative to him telling the story. So I think that was a good suggestion. And then someone else in the parish is a writer and gave me some suggestions. So early on, I kind of like got a little bit of pointers, and that kind of like helped me to change the direction. I think it was a big help for me. I think it helped to improve the story.
With us on the program is Monsignor Kenard Tuzeneu. That's Tuzeneu. The book is The Cloud People. You'll find it at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, all of the usual places. Any similarities between you and Billy?
Yes, I always said that there's a lot of sort of autobiographical stuff in the story. But yeah, there's a little bit of Billy in me, definitely. As a kid, I used to love to climb trees. We had an abandoned farm behind us, had a lot of apple trees, and that was like our playground. So Billy climbing the tree, the fascination, and then him flying in the clouds. Many times I can remember looking and just imagine what would that be like to like float above the trees. So yeah, definitely there's a lot of me and Billy, or Billy and me.
Well, it's fascinating to see Billy and what he goes through his first time taking this trip to spend summer with his grandparents, and what he goes through, and the emotions and the friendship and the story that unfolds in the book, The Cloud People. What were the biggest challenges for you, maybe obstacles in writing this? You mentioned just getting started and then working around your schedule. What were some of the challenges you faced in writing this?
Yeah, I don't know how other people, I mean, like, I didn't have the whole story in mind. So I really just started with the basic concept. And then as I would write, I would kind of like go to a certain point and say, well, I have to think to myself, well, what's next? What's gonna, which was sort of fun in a way, but then, and then like maybe I'll get an idea and say, well, how am I going to get to that point? So it was just kind of like the story evolving, and kind of like imagining like what could happen next. So it was just sort of like, and I had to wait for, that's the hard part of writing, is that like if the ideas don't come, I mean, nothing gets written. So a couple times I would get like stuck with the plot and kind of like waiting for an idea to come to me, and then kind of like I would go with that, and then maybe I would have to wait till something else came, but then eventually it started to come together.
When people are writing almost anything in a book, a term paper, anything like that, sometimes you get that writer's block that you talked about. That, how do you handle that? Do you just force yourself to come up with something, or walk away, forget it, and let the ideas come to you at the appropriate time?
Yeah, I kind of like take a break, because you can't force it to come. I notice even like for preaching, I mean, like, yes. I gotta wait for an idea to come, and you can't force it, even because I've actually started a sequel, and so I'm going through this all over again, and you kind of like have to wait for something to come to kind of like figure out where. And sometimes I have an idea and I say, well, no, that's not quite good, and then another one would jump into your mind and say, well, I think that's a better direction. So you kind of like have to wait for the inspirations to come in the mind to work to move forward.
How is it writing a sequel? This will be the second book. I'm sure you learned lessons from the first book. How valuable is that experience of having one that's already published and getting the preparation done for the second book?
Oh, it's definitely helpful, because I've been down that road before, and plus I have the basic plot and characters down. So in one sense it's like easier, because the basic points are there, and now it's a question of taking it into another direction, and plus kind of like getting into it. And part of me says, I want to know what happens too. So
I need to sit down and write this. Yeah, I can't wait to see what's going to happen. So our guest on the program is Monsignor Kenard Tuzeneu, Tuzeneu. The book is The Cloud People. You'll find it wherever books are sold. I love the book cover there, and we'll talk about that in a second, going through the mechanics of actually getting the book published once it's written. So many of these stories you talked about in the beginning, what Billy went through, sort of reflects your life or experiences. Do you have a favorite part of the book that you really enjoyed writing, and maybe even recalling some of your experiences?
Well, the farm reminds me of my grandparents' place, which was at one time a farm. Even like the house where I grew up, there was an abandoned farm behind it. So certainly that part of it, the climbing the trees, and all that. And then as I said, my dad was a veteran, so yes. I enjoyed kind of like including those parts into it. But I think probably my favorite was the ending, which kind of like it just came to me, and it was kind of like was a surprise, and it was kind of like it gave me a real sense of satisfaction. It's like, well, that's kind of like cool, and it really I wanted to kind of like leave people guessing,
Well, I didn't want to say too much in the beginning on that, but you're going to enjoy the end, and you really nailed it with that. The ending in all of the books, so many great lessons in the book, The Cloud People, a story well told by our guest, Monsignor Kenard Tuzeneu, the book available Amazon, all the usual places. Mention a little bit of Billy in you. Any other characters or circumstances there, again, that sort of reflect your past? You mentioned your farm, the grandparents' farm. You really tapped into real life for some of the situations, didn't you?
Yeah, I tried to. Yes, yeah, and then some of them remind me of family members, because I've had veterans in the family, and like my experience of growing up with family and relatives. So that's definitely in there, because I grew up in, thanks be to God, a close knit family. So there was always that that bond, So I think that there's definitely a lot of that in there.
Talk about it. We'll switch gears to sort of the business aspect of writing. The creative part you've got done. You've got the book. I'm ready to go and publish this. Talk about being out there and attempting to get the interest of a publisher and getting the book published. What was that like for you? Was that like a whole new experience working on the business side of writing?
Yes, it's maybe even more difficult than writing because I found out that it's not an easy world to get into. First, I discovered very quickly, like going directly to publishers is almost like impossible unless you have like a history, which I did not. So then I started researching publishing agents, and I submitted to a couple that seemed like it might be a nice fit. And I always say I'm very proud I was never rejected. I just never heard back. So, so that was interesting. And when I went through the lists, I would see like the kind of things that they were interested in. And it was kind of like, well, I guess that's not a good fit. So I done it, and I sort of like given up. And then I every once in a while I said, well, let me go back and look. And then all of a sudden, Christian Faith Publishing came up, and I thought, oh, that's good, because it's faith-based. I said, yes. Maybe they'll like what I have to say. So I contacted them. I got the publishing packet, and they were very good to work with. So they helped me. Obviously, it's a self-publishing, so it's not the same thing as being quote unquote a regular publisher, but they were very, very helpful, and they guided me through the process, and I think it helped make the book even better. So that was an important part. I'm glad that I found them because they were a friendly company, and they helped me to get it finished.
An important part is the book cover, and so often you see people that don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. They did a nice job. You did a nice job on the cover of The Cloud People, that really, with the color and the cloud in the background, the hot air balloon, it really captures your attention. How difficult was it to come up with a cover that you thought would capture people's attention and reflect favorably on the story?
But for me, it was pretty easy because that's one of the things that they ask, as part of the process, because they have different departments that deal with the different aspects. So they asked for a suggestion for the cover, and I just had the written concept of what they put on the actual cover of. I wanted the cloud face, the balloon, because that was part of the story, and then the main characters are like in the lower corner, and that's basically all that I said to them. And then they came up with this, and that was pretty much like it from the beginnings. I thought it was very creative, and I liked it like from the get-go. So their creative department came up with the design, and I think they nailed it. So I really didn't draw anything. I just gave a quick visual description of it, and they did the rest. So they did all the hard work.
Well, it's a very attractive cover that captures your attention. The book is The Cloud People. You'll find it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places. You said, I wanted to write something with family values, no horror, no hidden messages, except for family, faith, and life. And mission accomplished with that. You did an excellent job of touching all of those topics there. Talk about how important that was for you and you deal with young people on an ongoing basis, to give them positive reading material out there.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because even like when I watch television commercials come on, and I see like I'm not into gaming at all, but the games that are advertised, the movies, everything is dark.
Yes.
And negative, and even like I see among young people, they're sort of like bombarded with that, and even like kids in school, I think they're forced to deal with stuff that I don't think. I always say the kid should just be a kid. They should just enjoy life, because I remember that's what I was able to do, thanks be to God. I enjoyed my childhood, so I think that's what I wanted to. You got to enjoy life. I think as an adult world puts too much pressure on young people, they don't allow them to just enjoy life in a positive way, and I think that's certainly what we're intended to do. I think that's what God wants us to do. So it was very important to kind of like try to communicate that. You gotta have fun in a good way. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because you see, for example, competitive sports now, travel sports, and kids are like 8, 9, 10 years old and spending summer or after school hours and weekend hours doing that. and not a couple of older guys talking about how it used to be and how much fun we had growing up, but were we better off when we had the apple tree out back and we could go outside and find our own amusement and breathe some fresh air?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember as a kid, like it was punishment to come in.
Oh, yes, yes.
And for me, the lighter, the later. I mean, I love being outside, and thanks be to God for sports. I mean, I think it's a great outlet for kids, but you wonder, like I was never part of, organized sports. Part of it, just very quickly, I tried it for Little League one time and I got cut. The first time all I did was throwing the ball back and forth. But I mean, like outside of organized sports, I mean, like we had just pickup games. I mean, it seems like they don't know how to make fun on their own. It's got to be an organized sport, which is fine. I think that's wonderful. But I mean, what about just creating your own, amusement, your own fun in a positive way, using their own creativity? I mean, something doesn't have to be organized for you. I mean, what do you do on your own? I mean,
well, you've given them a positive outlet in this book, The Cloud People. A minute or so left in the program. You mentioned the new book you're working on. How long before you think that'll be published?
Well, I have the basic idea. In fact, just the last few days, I had kind of like a breakthrough in terms of where to take the plot. So this one's going to be a little bit more dramatic, shall we say, not in a negative way, but a little bit more intrigue to it, I think. So taking a little bit of direction. So this one I have a little bit more adventure to it, So I'm hoping maybe by the end of the year, maybe even by the fall, if I can. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. I would love to have a chance to talk about that as well. And you've done such a wonderful job with this book, The Cloud People. Talk about the satisfaction of doing this. You went through, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to continue it. Now you're to the point where you pick up a copy of The Cloud People for the first time. Got your name on the cover. The cover's inspired by you. Inside is your story. What was that like? The feeling of accomplishment when the book is actually published and people can read it and enjoy your story.
Yeah, it kind of like that sort of surprised me because when I finished it and kind of like the final phase and they're going to actually publish it and I got my first copies of it and then it didn't like hit me like right away. All of a sudden like, holy smokes! Wow, I actually did. I was proud telling this. I told the staff first, and I announced it at all the masses on the weekend. So I wasn't caught with it right away, but then also when it I guess reality kicked in, I said, "Holy smokes! I actually did this." And as you say, you hold the book and you look at it and you say, "Wow, I did this."
What an accomplishment in sharing this remarkable story, this uplifting story with so many people all around the country. The book is The Cloud People by Kenard, Kenard Tuzeneu, Tuzeneu. Book available at Amazon, the usual places. Also, kingpagespress.com. They're the author's marketing consultant and arranged our conversation with Monsignor today. Monsignor, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Wonderful job with this first book, and hopefully we can talk about the second one as well. Thank you for spending some time with us on the program.
Appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, you have a great day.
You're welcome. And once again, the book is called The Cloud People by Kenard Tuzeneu. All the information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back on today's program right after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.